I woke up to silence. Not just the absence of noise, but the kind of silence that weighs on your chest heavy and constant. In a house where laughter and conversation once lived, the quiet can feel louder than any alarm clock. My eyes instinctively moved to the other side of the bed, empty, still. Even after 20 months, part of me expected to see Miriam lying there, softly breathing in her sleep. I sat up slowly, joints creaking the way they do when you're 77. I've never been one to complain. Though, many men my age can't get out of bed without help. My years in engineering and the construction business taught me the value of maintenance structures and bodies alike. Downstairs, I brewed my usual strong coffee, ignoring the doctor's advice to switch to herbal teas. At your age, Mr. Burroughs, they'd say, but what's the point of a long life if every morning starts with compromise? Cup in hand, I stepped out onto the terrace. The villa stood proudly on a hill just outside Toledo with a sweeping view of the city. Miriam and I had dreamed of this place. When business took off, I bought the land and designed the house myself. 3 bedrooms, a spacious living room with panoramic windows, a study, and this terrace. Every inch was planned. Miriam had nurtured the garden. Now a gardener maintained it, though never quite the same. My phone beeped. A message from Vivian, my only daughter. Dad, Neil, and I will stop by on Sunday around 4. We need to talk. No? Good morning. No? How are you? Always straight to the point. She gets that from me. But where I soften my edges for family, Vivian sharpened hers. Okay, I'll be waiting. That was my reply. What else could I say? Our conversations these days revolved around 3 things: my health, their plans, which often needed my approval, or money, and the house. You're all alone in that big place, Dad. Maybe it's time to downsize. She'd never say it outright, but I knew what she meant. Sell the villa, release the equity. They had a daughter, my granddaughter, who'd soon need college tuition. The house had appreciated well. I went inside. The dishwasher had finished its cycle. I began putting things away, everything in its proper place. Miriam used to tease me about that. You design our kitchen like it's an engineering blueprint. She wasn't wrong, but in her absence, that structure gave my days rhythm. The days passed slowly. The weekends, once filled with gardening, town trips, or dinner with friends, had become stretches of empty hours. Most friends had either passed on, moved into care homes, or quietly drifted away. On Saturday, I drove downtown to clear my head. I visited the bookstore on Maple Street, one of the few places I still felt welcome. Hamish, the owner, greeted me. Roger, just thinking about you. That new Brunel biography came in. Set it aside, I said, browsing the shelves. How's Vivian? He asked. She's coming Sunday, I said, leaving it at that. He nodded. He knew the story. Sunday came too quickly and not soon enough. I made lunch, baked chicken and vegetables. Set the table in the dining room, though I knew Vivian preferred the kitchen. Why all the formalities, Dad? She always asked. But some things weren't up for debate. Right at 4 o'clock, I heard their car. Punctual, as always. Daddy, Vivian said, kissing my cheek lightly, you look good. Her eyes were already scanning the room. What had changed? What could be sold? Hello, Roger, Neil said, shaking my hand with his usual businesslike detachment. We? Sut. I asked about Olivia, my granddaughter. She's fine, Vivian said, getting ready for college. That's what we wanted to talk to you about. There it was. We're thinking Princeton, Neil said. Great for her future. What does Olivia think? I asked. They glanced at each other. She hasn't made up her mind, Vivian said. But Daniel thinks Princeton would open doors. Daniel, Neil's father, former professor, their family oracle. I couldn't hide the edge in my voice. Daniel, what about what Olivia wants? She's 16, Vivian said firmly. She doesn't know. Yet. You were 16 when you chose psychology over engineering. And I supported you. That was different, she snapped. Neil shifted topics. By the way, Daniel's invited us to dinner next Friday for his 70th. You'll come? I was surprised. Daniel had never shown much interest in including me socially. Our interactions were brief, polite, forgettable. But I nodded. Of course. It would be my pleasure. Lunch ended and Vivian offered to help with dishes. I knew the drill load the dishwasher, critique the kitchen. Have you thought about remodeling, Dad? These cabinets are ancient. They work perfectly. It's not just about function. Daniel just updated his kitchen smart appliances, modern. Layout. Vivian, I interrupted. I built homes for 35 years. I know more about design than an economist, she stiffened. Daniel just stays more current. He evolves. I stayed quiet. No use arguing. Since marrying Neil, Daniel had become her benchmark for everything. Me? Just the aging dad and the outdated. House. Neil entered the kitchen. Roger, given the tuition costs, maybe it's time to reevaluate some assets. Such as? I asked, though I already knew. Well. This house. Neil, I said flatly, I'm not selling the house. Be reasonable, Dad. Vivian added, You're 77. It's too much for you. I'm managing just fine. Financially, physically. But why keep it? You only use 3 rooms. I looked around and back at them. This house is my home. I built it. I designed it. And I'll live here as long as I choose. That ended the conversation for now. But the look they exchanged told me it wasn't over. Remembered that he wanted to show me an article on real estate investing. Daniel recommended it, he added, handing Meth clipboard. He says, the market is in the perfect position to sell large properties right now. I took the table but didn't read the article. Neil, I sold my company 10 years ago because I decided I'd had enough of business decisions. I want to spend the rest of my life not thinking about markets and investment strategies. But it's your money, Roger, Neil insisted. Don't you want to maximize its potential? I want to live peacefully in the house I love, I replied. That's enough. Vivian was clearly unhappy with the turn of the conversation. Dad, we just want to help. You're Becko-Mingenflexel. Maybe I agreed. Age is such a privilege. Left around 6 o'clock, leaving behind a feeling of dissatisfaction. I stood at the window watching their car go around the corner, thinking about dinner at Daniel's. Maybe I shouldn't go. But no, it would look petty. Besides, I was curious. What made Daniel put me on the closest list? Friday came faster than I expected. I put on my best suit, a navy blue one from Miriam's Lifetime, and ordered a cab to Daniel's house. He lived in the upscale Toledo neighborhood in a modern house that Vivian said was a model of elegant minimalism. Personally, I found it cold and impersonal, like a hotel room. Vivian met me at the entrance, clearly nervous. Dad, you're just in time. She looked at my suit appraisingly. You could have worn something more modern. This suit is Brooks Brothers, I replied. The classics never go out of style. She sighed and led me into the living room where the guests were already gathered, about 10 people. Mostly Daniel's peers, but some young faces too, including my granddaughter Olivia, who nodded politely to me from the corner of the room, still on the phone. Daniel, a tall, gay-haired man with impeccable posture, approached me with a glass of champagne. Roger, glad you could make it. His handshake was firm but impersonal. I hope you like Italian food. I hired a chef from Bissimo's. I love spaghetti and meatballs, I replied with an innocent smile, knowing that mentioning such a simple dish would make him cringe. Daniel didn't disappoint. a slight grimace sliding across his face before he got a hold of himself. "Well, I'm sure you'll discover something more exquisite." Dinner was served in the dining room where seats were marked with elegant cards. I was seated between an elderly lady who Wace introduced as Daniel's former university colleague and a middle-aged man I didn't know. Vivian and Neil sat next to Daniel in the center of the table. The dinner conversation revolved around economics, politics, and art topics in which Daniel shone with his erudition. I was mostly silent, watching as Vivian and Neil caught his every word. "Daniel, that's amazing," Vivian marveled after his monologue about contemporary art. "You have such a deep understanding of cultural context." "Yes, amazing analysis," Neil echoed her. "Father, you should write these thoughts down." I watched this scene feeling completely invisible. My daughter, who had never shown such enthusiasm for my accomplishments or knowledge, was glowing with every word from her father-in-law. Am I really fat and interesting or underducated in her eyes? What do you think, Roger? Daniel suddenly turned to me when the conversation turned to the renovation of Toledo's historic center. All eyes turned to me, and I felt suddenly nervous as, if I were in an exam, I think a lot of modern architects are too obsessed with form at the expense of function, I replied. Beautiful buildings that are uncomfortable for people are a failure, not an achievement. That's an interesting point of view, Daniel smiled slightly. Though many would argue that form itself is function in the context of urban aesthetics. Aesthetics shouldn't come at the expense of practicality, I objected. A building that looks like a work of art but leaks when it rains is just an expensive mistake. Papa has always been very practical. Vivian interjected with an apologetic smile. Engineering. You understand. Of course, Daniel nodded indulgently. There's value in that. But I've always believed that real culture requires the ability to go beyond purely utilitarian think. Several of the guests nodded approvingly, and the conversation turned to other topics. I was left with that strange feeling of having just been patted on the head like a child who had said something naive after dinner. As the guests scattered around the living room with their glasses, Daniel approached me again. Roger, Neil tells me you don't want to sell your house, he began without preamble. That's right. I confirmed it's my house and I intend to stay there. Daniel nodded understandingly. I respect your attachment to a place, but sometimes we have to think about the future, about the inheritance we leave to our children. Inheritance? I raised an eyebrow. Or the heirs. Isn't that the same thing? He smiled. Vivian is your only daughter. Naturally, you want to secure her future. I have secured her future by paying for her education and helping her over the years, I replied. Now I'm thinking about my own future. Daniel frowned slightly. Roger, don't take this the wrong way, but at your age, a big house can be a burden. I can handle it. I cut him off. Sure, for now, he agreed. But what about a year from now? 2 years from now? Better to make a decision while you're in complete control of the situation. I realized what he was getting at. Daniel was trying to convince me to sell the house while I was still legally capable of signing the papers until I needed guardianship. A wave of anger came over me, but I held it back. Thank you for your concern, Daniel, I said dryly. But I'm perfectly capable of determining when the time is right for such decisions. He nodded, but I could see in his eyes that the conversation wasn't over, just postponed. The evening ended with a toast in honor of the birthday boy, after which I hailed a cab, citing fatigue. Vivian walked me to the door. Daddy, you're leaving so early, she sounded annoyed. We haven't served the cake yet. I'm tired, Vivian, I answered honestly. And frankly, I'm not particularly comfortable here. Why not? She seemed genuinely surprised. Daniel was trying so hard to create a pleasant atmosphere. All his friends are such interesting people. I'm glad you enjoy your father-in-law's company, I said, but it's not my circle. Vivian sighed. That's why I'm saying you need to broaden your horizons. Daniel could teach you a lot. I looked at my daughter trying to figure out when and how. She started to think that a 7-year-old man who had built a successful business and life needed lessons from her father-in-law. Good night, Vivian, I said and walked out without waiting for an answer. On the way home, I reflected on the evening. Daniel, Vivian, Neil, they all seemed united in a mission to rescue me from my own home. But why? Was it just because of the money, or was it about something else? Was it about control? A desire to decide for me? When I got home, I stood in the hallway for a long time, looking at the familiar walls that held the memory of happy years with Miriam. No, I wasn't going to give up my home. But maybe I should have thought about how to protect myself from the growing pressure. A week passed after that unfortunate dinner at Daniel's. I tried to put it out of my mind, but my thoughts kept returning to the way Vivian and Neil had looked at their wise mentor. There was an almost religious worship in their eyes, something I had never seen when they looked at me. Wednesday morning began as usual: exercise, shower, breakfast. I planned to stop by Hamish's bookstore. He'd promised to set aside some new editions of architectural history for me. I had been reading more since Miriam's death, filling in the gaps in my education that I always felt around her. A graduate. Off College of Art. On my way downtown, I decided to stop by the Morning Breeze Cafe, a small cozy place with great espresso. It was Miriam and I's favorite Saturday brunch spot, and I still stopped by there. Keeping up a little tradition. Parking nearby, I was on my way to the entrance when I noticed familiar figures through the cafe's panoramic window. Sitting at a table. In the corner were Vivian Neal and Daniel Fenton. There were some papers in front of them, and all three of them were engaged in a serious conversation. Daniel was explaining something, gesturing vigorously, and Vivian and Neil were listening intently, nodding occasionally. I froze on the sidewalk. A strange feeling prickled somewhere under me ribs. Why are they meeting on a weekday? Why wasn't Vivian at work? And what papers were they scrutinizing so closely? I didn't want to look like a spy, but curiosity got the best of me. I walked into the cafe and pretended to notice them just now. Vivian, I called out as I approached their table. What a surprise. All three of them looked up. There was a look of surprise on their faces and then awkwardness. Vivian quickly gathered the papers into a folder. Dad, what are you doing here? I could have asked the same thing. I smiled. Shouldn't you be at work? It's my day off. She answered quickly. Neil and I just met Daniel for coffee. Roger. Daniel stood up and shook my hand. Nice surprise? Won't you join us? I noticed Vivian cast a quick, worried glance at her father-in-law, but he didn't seem to notice. I'd love to, I answered, pulling a chair over. An awkward silence hung around the table as the waitress took my order. I noticed Vivian tapping her fingers nervously on the file folder. So, what were you two discussing? I asked bluntly as the waitress stepped away. Nothing much, Vivian answered too quickly. Just family stuff. We've been consulting with Daniel about investments, Neil added. He's giving us some advice. Investments? I raised an eyebrow. In what field? Daniel leaned back in his chair with a slight smile. A little bit of everything. Real estate, stocks. Neil and Vivian want to diversify their portfolio. I nodded, feeling a prick of resentment. In all the years, Vivian had never once sought financial advice from, even though I'd built a business from scratch and successfully sold it. Instead, they'd consulted an economics professor who, as far as I knew, had never run a real business. And what were the recommendations? I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. Daniel thinks it's a good time to invest in real estate, Neil replied. especially in developing areas. And what neighborhood are you planning to invest in? There was an awkward silence again. Vivian glanced at Neil, then at Daniel. We haven't decided yet, she said finally. We're exploring our options. My coffee arrived, and I took a sip, watching the three of them. Something wasn't right here. Too much. Nervousness for a normal investment conversation. You know. Dad, Vivian suddenly said with fake ease, maybe you could join our discussion too. You have a background in real estate too, after all. Of course, I smiled. I'm always open to discussion. It's just strange that in all these years, you've never once asked my opinion on financial matters. Vivian blushed. Well, you've always been so busy, and then after Mom, we didn't want to bother you. Very thoughtful of you, I said, not hiding my sarcasm. But now that you know I don't mind, I'll be happy to help. Excellent, Daniel interjected with a diplomatic smile. It's always good to have different points of view. Although, of course, the theory and practice of investing has changed considerably in the last decade. It was a subtle hint that my experience was outdated. I swallowed with indignation. The basic principles remain the same. I observed, don't invest in something you don't understand. Don't chase quick profits. And remember that the most valuable asset is the land under the building, not the building itself. That's an interesting approach. Daniel smiled slightly. Like a teacher listening to a student's naive opinion. Although modern economic theory offers a more nuanced view, I felt myself-foiling, but I held back. I shouldn't have made a scene. Probably, I agreed, but my principles brought me a good income, enough to pay for Vivian's private school and college education. Vivian wrinkled her nose. Dad, that was a long time ago. Yes, I agreed. Almost as long ago as the last time you asked. My advice on something important. The atmosphere at the table became tense. Neil looked at his watch. We should go, he said, standing up. We still have a meeting at the bank. At the bank? I questioned. I thought it was your workday, Neil. Yeah, but he hesitated. It took the day off. Family stuff, you understand? I nodded, even though I didn't understand. What kind of urgent family thing required a meeting with Daniel and a trip to the bank? They hurriedly said goodbye, and I was alone at the table with my coffee. Through the window, I watched them stop in the parking lot, talk briefly about something, and then Daniel headed for his car and Vivian and Neil headed for theirs. Something was definitely going on behind me. I never made it to the bookstore. Instead, I drove home mulling over the situation. An indefinable uneasiness was keeping me on my toes. I understood that Vivian and Neil had the right to consult with whomever they wanted, but I was hurt by their apparent preference for Daniel's opinion over my own. At home, I pulled out old photo albums, a habit I resorted to when I was feeling particularly lonely. Here was Vivian at 5 on Miss Holder's laughing. Here she is at 12, proudly showing off her science project we did together all night. Here's the graduation from high school where she hugs Miriam and me beaming with happiness. When did everything change? When did I stop being a hero in my daughter's eyes and turn into a burden? Maybe it started when she went to college or when she met Neil or when Miriam got sick and I consumed with caring for my wife paid less attention to my daughter or all of these things together. I closed the album and decided I needed to try and patch things up with Vivian, not because of money or inheritance, but because she was my only child. The next day, I called her and invited her to lunch. Just the two of us. What, Neil? Dad, I'm on a very tight schedule. She began to refuse. Maybe in a couple weeks, Vivian, I said firmly. I want to talk to you. It's important. Something in my tone must have convinced her. Okay, she said after a pause. On Friday, I can spare an hour during my lunch break. We arranged to meet at a small restaurant near her office. I arrived early and took a table in the corner where it was quieter. Vivian was 15 minutes late. "I'm sorry," she said, sitting down across from me. "The meeting had gone on too long." "That's okay," I smiled. "It's good to see you." She looked tense. She ordered a salad and water, glancing at her watch. "So, Dad, what did you want to talk about?" I took a deep breath. "Vivian, I think we've grown distant from each other. I want to fix that." She blinked, clearly not expecting this start. "Dad, we see each other regularly." "Once a month," I finished for her. "Usually when you need something." "It's not a relationship, Vivian. It's a business meetings." Shepressed her. Lips together. "I have a job, a family, commitments. I can't come more often." "It's not about frequency," I explained. "It's about quality. When we see each other, I feel like you're just doing your duty." "That's not fair." She assented me. "I'm trying to keep things going, but you're not taking any steps forward." "What steps, Vivian?" She looked away. "You could be more open, taking advice. Thinking about the future. You mean sell the house?" "Not only that," she sighed. "Dad, you're stuck in the past. You refuse to change to learn new things. And who am I supposed to emulate? Daniel?" At the mention of her father-in-law, Vivian perked up. "Daniel is an educated man with a broad outlook. He's always up on the latest trends, reading, traveling. Unlike me, I finished for her. A simple engineer who's done nothing but work all his life." "I didn't say that," she frowned, "but I implied it." I looked her straight in the eye. "Vivian, I notice how you change around him. You become a different person." "What nonsense." She started to get annoyed. "I just respect this opinion. What about mine?" She was silent, clearly not knowing what to say. "Yours too," she said finally, but without conviction. "It's just that Daniel is more knowledgeable about some." "Things like finance?" I asked. "I happened to see the three of you at the cafe. It looked like you were discussing something important." Vivian tensed. "It was just investment plans." "Nothing special, so unimportant that you took time off from work to keep this meeting from me." "I don't have to report to you every step of the way." She flared up. "I'm 39 years old, Dad. I'm a grown woman." "Then why are you acting like a teenager?" "Who's hiding something?" She pushed back the unfinished salad. "You know what? This was a bad idea. I don't have time for interrogations. Vivian." I tried to soften my tone. "I just want to understand what's going on. You and Neil are clearly planning something, and it involves me or my assets. I have a right to know." "We're not planning anything," she cut me off. "And even if we were, it's our business. Neil and I should be thinking about Olivia's future, about her education. And you sit in your big empty house and refuse to see reality." "What reality? That you're getting old, Dad?" She almost shouted it, then lowered her voice, noticing the stares from neighboring tables. "You can't live alone in a house this big forever. Sooner or later, you're going to need help. And you and Neil are certainly willing to give it to me," I said ironically. "On condition that I sell the house and give you the money." "That's not fair," she shook her head. "We want what's best for you." "No, Vivian," I sighed tiredly. "You want what's best for you, and that's fine, but at least be honest with yourself." She stood up, tossing her napkin on the table. "I'm not going to listen to this. Call me when you're ready for a normal conversation." She walked away, leaving me alone with an unfinished lunch and the bitter realization that our attempt to get closer had only widened the chasm between us. On Sunday, while perusing the local newspaper, I came across an ad for an evening of classical music at the Town Theater. Miriam loved Chopin, and his second piano concerto was on the program. I decided to go. It was a way to honor her memory and unwind a little. Friday night, I put on my best suit and drove to the theater. The auditorium was almost full, mostly people my age, although there were a few young faces. I found my seat in the part and settled in, anticipating the music. As the lights began to dim, I noticed movement in the side aisle. To my surprise, I saw Daniel leading a group of people to their seats. Vivian and Neil were among them. They didn't notice me, taking seats a few rows ahead of me. During the concert, I couldn't help but watch them. Vivian sat between Neil and Daniel, occasionally leaning toward one or the other, clearly sharing her impressions. At intermission, they remained in their seats, chatting animatedly. I saw Vivian lowing at something Daniel had said, a sincere, open laugh that I hadn't heard her say to me in years. It was a month after that concert. I tried to call Vivian several times, but she either didn't answer or said she was very busy and would call back later. Of course, she didn't call back. I didn't insist. Trying to have a relationship with someone who doesn't want it is like trying to build a house on sand. Sooner or later, it's going to fall apart. Instead, I focused on my life. I started attending the local senior citizens club where I played chess with other senior citizens, signed up for a digital photography course. I'd always wanted to learn how to take pictures properly, but never had enough time. I even renewed my relationship with Edna Brighton, the widow of a longtime colleague of mine with whom we sometimes went to the movies or concerts. Nothing serious, just a friendly companionship that Webbeth missed. One sunny morning in early June, I decided to take a walk around the city center. The day promised to be hot, and I wanted to enjoy the coolness of the early morning. I left my car in the parking lot at the park and walked leisurely through the streets, watching the city wake up. As I passed the Prestige Motors dealership, I slowed down. There was a brand new Lexus in Thuindo silver, sleek and obviously expensive. I wasn't much of a car guy, preferring practicality to luxury, but even I could appreciate the beauty of this car. "You like it?" I heard a voice behind me and turned around. In front stood a man in his 40s in a business suit with a badge of a car dealership. Great choice. New model, fresh off the assembly line. I smiled. Just looking at my age, you don't need such powerful cars anymore. It's never too late to enjoy yourself. He smiled. I recently sold one just like it to a gentleman your age. He was delighted. Really? I politely joined the conversation. Then I'm not the only one who was crazy. The salesman laughed. Oh, that customer didn't buy it himself. It was a gift from his daughter-in-law and son. A very generous 70th birthday present. I'll tell you, I felt a strange chill. Do you remember the gentleman's name? We don't usually disclose customer information, the salesman began, but then shrugged. It was a very memorable case, though. Mr. Fenton, I think. Yes, that's right. Daniel Fenton, a very personable man, a professor, if I'm not mistaken. It took my breath away. Daniel, daughter-in-law and son, 70th birthday. It all fit. Vivian and Neil bought Daniel a Lexus for his anniversary. Are you feeling okay, sir? The salesman asked worriedly. You're pale. I'm fine, I said. It's a little hot today. Why don't you come inside? We have air conditioning water. No thanks. I took a step back. I gotta go. Have a good day. I left quickly, feeling a storm of emotions building up inside. Vivian and Neil bought Daniel a Lexus. An expensive brand new Lexus that must have cost at least $80,000. And these were the same people who a month ago had asked me for money for a down payment on a house because they didn't have enough money of their own. I was so shocked that I didn't even remember walking to the parking lot and getting into my car. My head was spinning with thoughts. How long have they been planning this gift? Surely it must have been one of those investments they discussed with Daniel at the cafe. And all this time they kept hinting that I should sell my house because it was too big and requires a lot of effort and attention. I reached the house in something of a fog. Upon entering, he went straight to the bar and poured myself a scotch. Even though it was barely 11 in the morning, I needed to calm down to think about the situation. Maybe I'd gotten it all wrong. Maybe the salesman had gotten it wrong. But deep inside, I knew it was exactly as Hess said. It explained Vivian and Neil's strange behavior in recent months, their secret meetings with Daniel, their reluctance to let me in on their plans. I dialed Vivian's number, but the call went to voicemail. I left a short message. Call me back. It's important. She didn't call back until later that evening. Dad, what's wrong? I could hear concern in her voice. I need to talk to you, I said, in person. I'm real liberacy this week, I said. Tomorrow, I interrupted. 6 o'clock at night. I'll wait for you at home. There was a pause. Okay, she said at last, but I'll only be able to stay for a little while. I spent a restless night replaying various scenarios of the upcoming conversation in my head. The next day dragged on endlessly. I tried to distract myself with work in the garden, but my thoughts kept returning to Vivian, Neil, and that damn Lexus. At 6 sharp, the doorbell rang. Vivian stood on the doorstep, wary and a little nervous. Hi, Daddy, she said, entering the house. What's so urgent? I led her into the living room and offered her tea, but she declined. I don't have much time, she reminded me. What did you want to talk about? I decided not to beat around the bush. You bought Daniel a Lexus for his birthday. Her eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed. How did you know that? Then it's true? I shook my head. I found out by accident from the salesman at the car dealership. He mentioned the professor who'd been given a car by his daughter-in-law and son for his 70th birthday. Vivian crossed her arms over her chest. So what of it? Neil and I have the right to use our money however we want. Of course, I agreed. I just wondered how you had enough money for Daniel's new Lexus, but not enough for a down payment on the house you wanted to buy. For an investment. Her face flashed. Those are completely different things. The gift to Daniel was a special occasion. So special that you didn't see fit to mention it. We knew you wouldn't understand. She snapped. You've always been against unnecessary spending. As you call it, I'm not against spending, Vivian. I'm against hypocrisy. You come to me asking me for money for a house while insinuating that I should sell mine. And at the same time, you spend a huge amount of money on a gift for Daniel. Daniel deserves that gift, she blurted out. He's always supported us. Always. Been there for us. Given us advice, and I don't? I asked quietly. I haven't supported you. Didn't give advice. Wasn't there for you? Vivian looked away. This is different. Different how? I could feel the anger building up inside. Explain it, me, because I really don't understand how Daniel deserved this gift and I didn't. She turned to me, and in her eyes I saw a coldness I'd never noticed before. You want to know the truth? All right. Daniel is an educated, cultured, sophisticated man. He's interested in art, literature, music. You can talk to him about anything, and he always knows more than you expect. He never judges, never criticizes, never pretends to know everything better than anyone else. Every word hit like a hammer. And me? I asked, feeling something inside me die. Who am I in your eyes? Vivian took a deep breath. You're a good man, Dad. You've worked hard, provided for us, but you've always been limited. Always thought that practicality trumps education, that money solves everything. You never understood why I wanted to study art history instead of engineering. You laughed at my useless interests. And even now you stubbornly cling to the past, to your home, to your outdated views, refusing to recognize that the world has changed. I listened in a daze. Every word cut like a razor dot. Was this really how she'd seen me all these years? A limited, stubborn old man who couldn't understand her? I never made fun of your interests, I said quietly. I was concerned about your future. I wanted you to have a profession that would give you stability. See, she splashed her hands. You don't even realize it now. Life isn't just about stability and practicality. It's beauty, culture, art, and you found it all in Daniel. I finished. For her. Yes, she didn't deny it. Daniel showed me a world you don't even know about. He taught me to appreciate the beautiful, to think bigger, to see things in perspective. And for that, he got Alexis. Don't oversimplify, she grumbled. It was a token of appreciation for everything he'd done for us. What have I done for you, Vivian? I asked. Don't I deserve a thank you? She was silent, and that silence was more eloquent than any words. I understand, I say it at last. You think a father like me is not worthy of such a gift. I didn't say that, she said, but without conviction. You don't need words, it shook my head. Your actions speak louder. We stood opposite each other, separated not only by the distance of a few steps, but by a gulf of incomprehension that seemed to widen with every word. You know what? I suddenly felt tired. Maybe you're right, Dot. Maybe it really is time for me to let go of the past, this house, these memories. Maybe it's time to move on. Vivian looked at me wearily. What do you mean? I'm going to sell the house, she blinked. Clearly not expecting this. Daddy, I don't want you to make these decisions on emotion. No. I held up my hand, stopping her. You and Neil are right. This house is too big for me. I'll find something smaller, more suitable for a lonely old man. We can help you look, Vivian said quickly. Something like greed flashing in her eyes. Neil knows a great realtor. I'm sure he does, I said dryly, but I can do this on my own. Dad, are you sure? This is a big decision. Maybe you should think about it. I've already thought about it, I interrupted. And I've decided the house will be sold. She nodded, trying to hide her relief and joy. Good. If you need help, I think you should go. I glanced at my watch. You said you didn't have much time. Vivian hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave when the conversation took such an unexpected turn. Maybe I could stay a little longer. We could discuss the details of what? I asked. The sale, the distribution of the money. Don't worry, Vivian. I'll handle everything myself. She frowned. Daddy, I just want to help. You don't have to do everything alone. How did you help Daniel pick out Alexis? I couldn't help but be sarcastic. Thank you, but I prefer to do things on my own. Her face flashed again. You're insufferable. We're trying to do what's best, and you take everything personally. What's best for whom, Vivian? For me or for you? We were on opposite sides of the barricade again. I could see her struggling with herself, trying to hold back her anger and maintain a semblance of concern. You know what? She finalisated. Do whatever you want. Sell the house, move, whatever. But don't come complaining later when you're alone. In a strange place. I'm already alone, I said quietly. A long time ago. She gave me a long look, then turned and walked toward the door. She stopped on the threshold. I'll call you one of these days to see how things are going with the sale. And she left without even saying goodbye. I was alone in the living room staring. At the closed door, a strange calmness swept over me. The decision had been made, and it felt right, despite the circumstances that had led to it. Yes, I would sell the house, but not in the way Vivian had expected, not the way she and Neil and Daniel had planned. I made my way to my office, turned on my computer, and opened a search engine. Top realtors in Toledo, I typed in. It was time to take charge of the situation. The next morning, I called Mallory Court, a realtor with an impressive track record of sales in high-end real estate. We set up an appointment for the same day. Mallory turned out to be an energetic woman in her 50s with a tenacious eye and business acumen. She walked around the house taking notes and photographs. "Mr. Barrows, your villa is a real gem," she said when she was finished. "Great location, beautiful architecture, well-maintained grounds. I'm sure we can find a buyer very quickly." "How fast?" "With the right pricing and marketing strategy, probably within a month." I nodded. "That's good. I want this to be done as quickly and confidential." Mallory raised an eyebrow. "Confidential?" "Yes." I looked her straight in the eye. "I don't want word of sale to get out too widely, at least not initially." She nodded. "UNDERSTANDINGLY. Family circumstances." "You could say that." "Don't worry, Mr. Burrows. We'll proceed discreetly. The sale will be advertised only in closed databases for selected clients." We discussed the price, and it was even higher than I expected. The years since it was built had significantly increased the value of the land, and my continued investment in repairs and upgrades kept the house in excellent condition. "What about a new home for you?" Mallory asked. "Have you looked at anything?" Not yet, I admitted, but I'm open to suggestions. I have a few options that might work for you." She made a note in her notebook. "I'll send you the information tonight." When she left, I sat in a chair in the living room, looking out at the garden through the panoramic window. What am I doing? Am I really ready to part with the house that has been the center of my life for so many years? But the longer I thought, the more confident I became in my decision. This house, once filled with love and happiness, was now an occasion for strife, an object of greed. Maybe it really is time to let it go. But if I did, it would be on my terms, not the way Vivian, Neil, and Daniel had planned. After meeting with Realtor Mallory Court, events began to unfold faster than I expected. The next day, she sent me a list of potential properties that I might be interested in as a new home. Most of them were small apartments in upscale neighborhoods or compact homes in gated senior communities. I put those suggestions aside. I had other plans. First, I needed to contact a lawyer. Edward Hines had been my lawyer since the days of active business. 70 years old, he was only 7 years younger than me, but he wasn't about to retire. What am I going to do in retirement? He used to say when I asked him that. Sit at home and wait to die? No, I'd rather die at my desk with a pen in my hand. I called his office and made an appointment for the next day. Edward's secretary, hearing my name, immediately found a window in his busy schedule. "Mr. Hines will be glad to see you, Mr. Burrows. Would tomorrow at 10 o'clock suit you?" When I entered the familiar downtown office, Edward rose to meet me with the same energetic smile I remembered from our first meeting 30 years ago. "Roger, what are you doing here?" He shook my hand firmly. "The last time I saw you when you were making your will after Miriam died." "Yeah, about then." I nodded, sitting down in the chair across from him. "I've decided to sell the house, Ed, and I need your advice." Edward raised his eyebrows. "Self-house? That's a big decision. I thought you intended to live there for the rest of your life." "Plans have changed. I didn't go into the details of the family drama, but I want to do it a certain way." I outlined my plan to him. Edward's eyebrows rose higher as he spoke. "It's unconventional," he said when I was done, "but a legitimate one. Are you sure you want to go this route?" "Absolutely." I nodded. Vivian made it clear a long time ago that she wanted my money, not me. Well, she learned her lesson. Edward tapped his fingers on the table thoughtfully. "We'll need a few documents for that. First, a new will. Second, perhaps we should consider an annuity." "An annuity?" I interjected. "Yes, it's a financial instrument that guarantees you a regular income for the rest of your life," Edward began to explain. "You put in a large sum of money, and the insurance company pays you monthly installments. The main advantage is that when you die, the balance of the money doesn't go to your heirs. It stays with the insurance company. I smiled. This was exactly what I needed. It sounded perfect. Tell me more about it. We spent the next hour discussing the details of the plan. I decided to sell the house, invest some of the money in a new, more modest home for myself, and put the bulk of it into an annuity. In this way, I would ensure a comfortable life for the rest of my life. But after my death, Vivian would not receive a dime of the money from the sale of the house. "That's harsh, Roger," Edward said when we'd finished. "Are you sure you won't regret it?" I wondered. Yes, maybe it was cruel. But wasn't it cruel the way Vivian had treated me all these years? Wasn't it cruel to buy an expensive car for my father-in-law while trying to get my own father to sell the house? "I'm sure," I answered firmly. "Get the paperwork ready." "Okay," Edward nodded. "But keep in mind that as soon as Vivian and Neil find out about the sale, they might try to intervene." "Are you ready for that?" "More than ready," I grinned. "I expect it." On the way home, I reflected on my conversation with Edward. What hailed me to such a drastic decision? When had my relationship with my only daughter turned into a cold war over assets? I remembered Vivian as a child, an inquisitive, bright girl, with a sharp mind and a warm smile. She loved it when I would take her to construction sites where, wearing a little helmet, she would watch with delight as the buildings grew. "Daddy, when I grow up, I'm going to build houses too," she would say, sitting on my shoulders. What happened to that little girl? When did she turn into a cold, calculating woman for whom material values became more important than family ties? Maybe it was my own fault. I was always working hard, often absent from home. Miriam did most of the parenting while I built my business. I was providing for the family, but perhaps I wasn't giving enough of what was more important than money. Time, attention, emotional support. When Vivian went to college, she didn't choose engineering as I had hoped, but art history. I was disappointed and probably didn't hide it. Miriam said to me then, "Roger, she's looking for herself. Give her space." I obeyed and paid for her education, even though I thought it was impractical. And then came Neil, a graduate of a prestigious business school, ambitious with impeccable manners and connections. Vivian fell in love, and I couldn't help but notice how she began to change, adjusting to his world. She became interested in art, classical music, wines, all the things Neil and his family valued. I remembered their wedding, a lavish event where I felt like an outsider among the elegant guests, discussing the latest exhibitions and opera productions. Daniel Fenton had made a brilliant speech, quoting Shakespeare and Plato, and my simple congratulations, sincere, but without literary finesse, seemed to embarrass Vivian. From that day on, the gulf between us only grew. Every time we met, I felt Vivian assessing me through Fenton eyes and finding me insufficiently cultured, insufficiently refined. And when Olivia, my granddaughter, was born, I was almost removed from her upbringing. "Grandpa Daniel is teaching Olivia French," Vivian reported proudly, not noticing the pain in my eyes. Of course, there were bright moments. I'd helped them with the down payment on their house, financed Olivia's private school, and was always willing to support them financially. And they took that help for granted, never really thanking me. And Miriam fell ill. The cancer was diagnosed at a late stage, and the next 3 years became an endless succession of hospitals, doctors, and medications. Vivian came rarely, always in a hurry, always with excuses about work, about Olivia's school, about other commitments. I didn't blame her. Seeing my mother in that condition was hard, but when Miriam died and Vivian quickly returned to her life after the funeral, leaving me alone with an empty house and memories, something inside me snapped. And now this Lexus for Daniel. It waste. Last straw. Not the fact of the expensive gift, but what it symbolized. Vivian valued her father-in-law more than her father. She thought he was worthy of generosity, and I was not. I returned home with the firm intention of moving forward with the plan. The next day, I called Mallory and gave the green light to sell the house. Events moved quickly. Mallory arranged several showings for select clients, and within a week I had 3 offers, all above the asking price. I chose the highest from a couple from Chicago who were looking for a home for retirement. At the same time, Edward prepared the paperwork for an annuity and a new will in which I would leave a modest amount to Olivia for her education and the rest to charity. I also found a new place to live, a small but elegant one-story house in a gated retirement community on the outskirts of town. It was 10 times smaller than my villa, but had everything I needed. A comfortable layout, a small garden, and what I particularly liked, a terrace overlooking the lake. In all this time, Vivian hadn't called. I didn't contact her either, deciding to let things take their course. My plan had almost succeeded. I had already signed the preliminary agreement to sell the villa and put down a deposit on the new house. When the thunder rumbled, it was an ordinary Tuesday morning. I had just returned from my morning walk and was brewing coffee when the doorbell rang. Vivian stood on the doorstep, pale and anxious. "Papa, may I come in?" She asked without greeting. I stepped aside, letting her into the house. "What's wrong, Vivian? You look upset." She walked into the living room and turned to me. "Is it true?" she asked in a shaky voice. "Are you selling the house?" I nodded calmly. "Yes, it's true. But why?" She splashed her hands. "Why now? And why didn't you tell us?" "I thought you'd be glad," I answered, sitting down in the chair. "You and Neil have been saying for months that I should sell the house and move to something smaller." "Yeah," but she stammered. "Not like this. We were supposed to talk about it together. Make a plan." "We already have a plan," I said. "The house is for sale. I found a new place to live. Everything is organized." Vivian sank down on the sofa, looking completely shocked. "Who's the buyer?" "A couple from Chicago. They offered a great price." "Where are you going to live?" "I bought a house in Sunset Hills in a retirement community." She cringed. "Dad, you can't live there. It's like a nursing home, only with separate houses." "I liked it there," I answered calmly. "It's quiet, safe. There's a hobby club, a swimming pool, and a medical center nearby." Vivian wrung her hands nervously. "But what about the money from the sale? You're going to get a huge amount." "What are you going to do with it?" There it was. The real cause of her anxiety. "I have a plan for it." "What kind of plan?" She stepped forward. "Dad, you have to consult with us. This is serious money and it needs to be invested properly." "I've already made up me mind." "Vivian," I said, "and believe me, this money will be used wisely." But she was obviously choosing her words. "But you'll leave a part of it for the inheritance, right? For Olivia's college." For what, Vivian?" I looked her straight in the eye. "Alexis, for you, and I'm 70. She turned even paler. "Is that what you mean, Dad?" "You've got it all wrong." This was a special occasion. Daniel had done so much for us, and I didn't. She was silent, not knowing what to say. "Look," I said, softening my tone, "I don't blame you for appreciating Daniel. He's an educated, cultured man, and he's important too. Your family, but you've made it very clear to me that I don't deserve the same respect and generosity." "That is not true," she exclaimed. "I never said that." "Maybe not explicitly, but issued it by my actions. And you know what? I accepted it. I accepted that you and I would never be as close as you and Daniel, that you'll always think I'm not sophisticated enough. Sophisticated for your new social circle." Vivian began to cry quietly, restrained as always. "Papa, please don't do this." "Don't." Sell the house. Why not? I asked. Didn't you say it was too big for me? That I couldn't take care of it? Yes, but she looked at him with pleading eyes. But this is our family home. I grew up here. I have so many memories. The ones you bring back once a month when you come here for an hour. She ignored my sarcasm. I always thought that someday in the future this house would be ours. That Olivia would be able to come here for vacations, that would keep it in the family. This is it. The truth at last. She never worried that the house was too big for me or that I couldn't take care of it. She just considered it her future inheritance and worried that it was slipping out of her hands. Vivian, I said quietly, you never once said you wanted to. Keep the house for sentimental reasons. You've always said only that it was too big, too expensive to maintain, that I needed something smaller. I thought that was obvious, she sobbed. It's my childhood home. Of course, you want to keep it for yourself, I clarified. Not for me. She shook her head. No, Dad, you've got it all wrong. I'm really worried about you. This house, it's full of memories of Mom. I thought it would be easier for you in a new place. Don't pretend it was out of concern for me. I felt anger rising inside. You wanted me to sell the house while I could still sign the papers myself and give the money to you for Olivia's college, for investments, for whatever. And now that I'm actually selling the house, but I'm going to dispose of the money my own way, you suddenly remember sentimental value. Vivian jumped up from the sofa. That's not fair. You always see the worst in me. Am I not right? I asked. Tell me honestly, if I sold the house and gave you the money, would you be so upset? She was silent, and that silence was more eloquent than any words. Daddy, she said at last, trying to pull herself together. I beg you, don't sell the villa. Let's find another solution. Neil and we could help with the upkeep or even move here so you wouldn't alone. I laughed. Vivian, I know you. You wouldn't trade your fancy house downtown for the suburbs. And you certainly don't want to live under the same roof as me. I'm just trying to find a compromise, she exclaimed. No, I shook my head. You're trying to maintain control of an asset you think is yours. But you know what? This is my house. I built it. I've lived in it, and I decide its fate. We stared at each other across the room, separated not only by physical distance, but by years of misunderstandings, resentments, unspoken feelings. What are you going to do with the money? Vivian finally asked in a low voice. It's none of your business, I answered. I'm a grown-up and I'm in charge of my own finances. Daddy, please don't do this. She came closer and took my hand. Don't sell the villa. It's our legacy, our family history. I looked at my daughter, a beautiful, successful woman who for the first time in years was showing some real emotion in talking tone. But was that emotion genuine? Or was it just panic at the thought of losing a potential inheritance? The decision has been made, Vivian, I said firmly. Fee contract's already signed. I'm moving out in a month. She let go of my hand and stepped back. As if I'd hit her. You can do this to us, she whispered. It's not fair. Unfair? I raised an eyebrow. Was it fair to treat me like an ATM machine for years and then give expensive cars to Daniel? That's not fair at all. She flared up. You're distorting everything. Am I? I shook my head. Vivian, I'm not blind or stupid. I can see how you and Neil feel about me, how you admire Daniel and his opinion, and how you disregard mine. How you come only when you need something. That's not true? She shook her head, but without conviction. It is, and we both know it, I sighed. Vivian, I love you. You're my daughter, but I won't let you continue to manipulate me. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. A mixture of anger, pain, and perhaps realization. What do we do now? She finally asked. Accept reality, I replied. I sell the house and move. You go on with your life and Maybe we can find a way to communicate as adults without ulterior motives and manipulation." Vivian was silent for a long minute, then slowly shook her head. "I can't believe you're doing this," she said quietly. "After everything Neil and I have done for you." "And what have you done, Vivian?" She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. We looked after you." Weckled. "We visited once a month." I reminded her, and usually when you needed something that's not fair. She was starting to get agitated again. "We have your own lives, our own obligations." "Of course," I nodded. "And I'm not asking for more. I just want you to recognize the truth. You're more interested in my house and my money than you are in me." "That's not true," she exclaimed. But there was a twinkle of guilt in her eyes. "Then why are you here, Vivian? Is it not because you found out about the sale of the house? If it hadn't been for that, when would you have come again? In a month, too?" She didn't answer, and I saw a tear roll down her cheek. "Papa, don't sell the villa," she repeated quietly. "Please." I shook my head. "It's too late, Vivian. The decision has been made." She stood up abruptly. "All right. Do as you please, but don't come to me later when you realize you've made a mistake." "I won't," I promised. "You can be sure of that." She turned and walked quickly to the door. She stopped on the threshold and looked at me over her shoulder. "I hope you know what you're doing," she said, and walked out, slamming the door loudly. Moving. Day came sooner than I expected. 3 weeks passed in a flurry of activity. Sorting through my belongings, deciding what to take and what to leave behind, meeting with Edward to sign Theanity papers, talking to the buyers of my house and the realtor. In all that time, Vivian hadn't called once. I hadn't dialed her number either. What could I say after our last conversation? However, on the 3rd day after her visit, Neil called me. The conversation was short and tense. "Roger," he began in a formal tone, "Vivian is very upset. I was hoping we could discuss the situation in a more rationally." "What exactly do you want to discuss, Neil?" "I asked the sale of the house. Vivian thinks you're making a hasty decision. Perhaps if we all sat down and discussed the options." "There are no options, Neil," I interrupted him. "The house is sold. The papers are signed." There was a pause. "I understand," he said finally. "What about the proceeds?" "That's it. The big question. I bought a new house and secured my income for the rest of my years through a will." I could clearly hear the hope in his voice. "No," I answered. "Through an annuity." Again that pause, longer this time. "Annuity," Neil repeated slowly. "You mean an insurance product that pays you an annuity for life but leaves nothing to your heirs?" "Exactly," I confirmed, impressed by his financial knowledge. "A very practical solution for a man of my age." "But it means," he stammered, clearly hesitant to say so, "that Vivian won't get the money." "Yes, I finished for him." "That's right, Roger." There was barely contained anger in his voice. "Now you're making a mistake. You're punishing your own daughter, your own family." "No, Neil," I interrupted him. "I'm making a rational financial decision that will provide me with a comfortable old age without having to depend on anyone." "Isn't that what you and Vivian and Daniel wanted?" "For me to be rational and forward-thinking. You know, that's not what we meant." His voice turned cold. "What did you mean, Neil? That I should sell the house and give the money to you, or maybe buy a Lexus for Daniel?" He inhaled sharply. "Understand your position, Roger. I'm sorry it turned out this way." "Me too, Neil. Believe me, so am I." That was the end of our conversation. On moving day, I was assisted by a company of professional movers. I took only the essentials with me: clothes, books, a few pieces of furniture I was particularly attached to, and, of course, Miriam's photos and personal belongings that I couldn't leave behind. It was a strange feeling to leave the house I had lived in for over 30 years. Every corner, every room held memories. This is where Vivian took her first steps. Here, Miriam and I spent our last happy days before her illness. Here I was alone after her death, trying to pick up the pieces of my life. I walked around the empty rooms one last time. In the bedroom where Miriam and I had once made our bed, there were now only footprints in the carpet. Vivian's room was clean and empty. No sign of the girl who had once pasted rockstar posters on the walls. Thanks for watching.